Hello, and welcome to the 2012 League of Women Voters Election Forum. I'm the moderator, Murray Farber, former newspaper and TV news editor. We're pleased that the candidates have joined us so that you can learn where they stand on issues in the elections to be held on November 6th. The League of Women Voters does not support nor oppose any candidate or political party. Before I introduce the candidates, I'd like to explain our format. We'll give each candidate a minute to tell you about themselves in an opening statement. Then we will get to the questions for 1-minute answers with 30-second rebuttals where appropriate. The order in which they speak was determined earlier. They were not given any peeks at the questions in advance. At closing, the candidates will offer a 1-minute statement. So here we go. Today with us are Bob Whalen and Jim Patterson. And I'm going to ask Bob to go first to tell us about himself and what makes you a better candidate for the 23rd State Assembly District.
Well, thank you, Murray, and thanks to the League of Women Voters for hosting this event. It is so important that we all engage in this process that really is unique, at least started out unique in this country, where we as citizens have an opportunity to decide who it is that will be making decisions for us here at the state level. So I am hoping that at the end of today's debate, that those who are taking the time to watch will be able to maybe see some of the distinctions between the two of us. This is a unique situation in that in this particular seat we have two Republicans that are running. And while we may be the same on a lot of issues, or be on the same side of a lot of issues, perhaps maybe over the period of this debate you'll be able to see some distinctions between the two of us. And I hope that today, because my responsibility is to help show you some of those distinctions.
Thank you very much. My turn. All right. Thank you. Thank you also to the League of Women Voters for the opportunity to be here. And thank you for caring about the state of California and the 23rd Assembly District. And thank you for being on the other side of the camera. I think this is a job interview. You are looking to send somebody to represent you in Sacramento, and I would like to earn your vote and will, to the best of my ability, explain why I think the experience as mayor of Fresno and 30 years in private business helps to provide me the kind of foundation and background to go to Sacramento. I think that Sacramento has many of the same challenges that we faced in Fresno, and we have budgets that are needing some serious attention. We have public safety issues that we need to address, so I'd like to take the experience that I had in the mayor's office and also the private sector and go to Sacramento and try to similarly make tough decisions on your behalf.
Bob mentioned the unusual situation we have that as a result of the primary and the new top two rules, we wind up with two Republican candidates opposing each other in this upcoming general election. Still, 34% of the district is considered Democrats. How do you appeal to those voters, starting with you, Jim?
Sure. I had the wonderful opportunity to serve as the mayor of the 5th largest city in the state of California, Fresno, and it was a delight. But it is a nonpartisan office. Mayors of Fresno represent Democrats, Republicans, and independents. And when I was mayor, I worked with Democrats on my city council, most of the time, a majority of Democrats. And so we learned how to balance budgets and to get along and to be effective. And to work across name tags. I don't think party tags cut it anymore. I think common sense solutions to the kinds of difficulties that we face, I think, is the way to represent Democrats, independents, Republicans effectively, regardless of party title. And I will listen and pay attention, and especially to Democrats watching. I was a mayor of a city that had a lot of Democrats there, and also had the opportunity of serving on a council with Democrats as well. We'll talk, we'll listen, we'll share, and I think we can get some things done.
What I've noticed is that I've had the opportunity to go out and visit with voters and job creators and and people who are really going through a tough time as well, as I've been campaigning for this particular seat. And one of the things that really hits me is how similar we are. I think, unfortunately, labels seem to define us much more than they should. In the Central Valley, there are certain things that bring us together. We are an agricultural-based society here in the Valley. A lot of our economy is generated from what happens out in the fields. And I think what comes with that is a lot of common sense, a lot of understanding that we need to work well together in order to get things done. And certainly in the community of Clovis and in this Central Valley, we've had opportunities to do that. And we've seen that in the city of Clovis by making sure taxes remain low and that our budget remains balanced. And as mayor, we went from, when I was mayor of the city of Clovis, we went from a 4% surplus now to a point where we have a 12% surplus. By my taking a pay cut as mayor, as well as my colleagues on the council, our management, and then we went to our employees and they also took the pay cut. So we know how to work well with one another. I'll continue to do that up there in Sacramento.
We have an unusual situation of two propositions, 30 and 38 on the ballot, looking to raise taxes. 30 would use the additional money to balance the budget, and 38 would spend the money primarily on K through 12 education. They've been called conflicting since only one can go into effect. Do you support either one, and why? Can we start with you, Bob?
Sure. Just as a general principle, I'm not a big fan of voting in favor of propositions. I found that, unfortunately, a lot of the time special interests get involved in the arguments over propositions. And I think that the better way, and the way that we should, with some exception, we should work through the issue is by making sure that those that we elect up in Sacramento work together in order to solve the problems that we're facing. When it comes specifically to tax increases, I am in favor of actually increasing the income of those that I represent as opposed to taking more money away from them. Certainly there are financial constraints that have been placed on Sacramento and our state's budget. We face the same problems in the city of Clovis. And what we did, even though there was a tax initiative, the citizens of the city of Clovis and myself opposed that tax initiative. And as a result of that, we discovered what our priorities were. And education certainly is a priority in the city of Clovis, and it needs to be a priority in the state of California. And so I will vote against both of those propositions, because if we increase the revenue of the citizens of the city of Clovis, then our state tax treasury will increase as well. That's what we need to focus on.
Yeah, Sacramento kind of reminds me of a group of folks who are all starving and they're sitting around the dining room table, and they all have forks and they're all picking away at the plucked chicken. And instead of getting fed, they're actually sticking each other and warring over a deficit, red ink. The most important thing I think we can do to represent you effectively is to learn the lesson of other states that are creating jobs and creating wealth and creating prosperity, creating paychecks instead of more welfare checks. And I think we can do that by demonstrating that there are states that are succeeding and that California can change some of its taxation and some of its regulatory schemes in order to be competitive. And that's going to give jobs to everybody, Democrat, Republican, Independent, and I think that's very, very important. I don't think raising taxes will do that. What raising taxes will do will be to stunt the growth, will be to stop entrepreneurs from being interested in being here in the state of California. We don't want job flight, we want job creation. So no, I am not for tax increases. California has a spending problem, not an income problem.
Let's talk some more about Sacramento. There are difficulties every year in coming up with a balanced budget. There are feelings that we get more rhetoric than action out of Sacramento. There are some people who want no tax pledges signed. How are we going to get more bipartisan cooperation on legislation, particularly on the state budget? Let's start with you, Jim.
Sure. Well, first of all, I think you go to Sacramento with an effort to make friends, not political enemies. It's the heart of representation. So first of all, I want to get to know members of the opposite party and get to know my colleagues in Sacramento, and I want them to get to know our region, our hydrology, our agriculture, how a fifth largest city in the state can coexist well with the richest agricultural county. And so I think you make friends, and I think you pay attention to the issues that these other members of the legislature bring to you, so that you can earn the privilege of asking them to be cautious about spending and decisions that hurt us, and help when we need legislation that will help us in our region. And I also think that you do it the old-fashioned way by being persistent and persuasive, and try to get folks to understand the importance of the priorities that you bring from this region. And I think if you earn that opportunity, I think you can turn the situation in the state of California with respect to the representatives' relationships one with another. Try hard and make friends, and I think that'll be effective.
Bob?
I think that, Murray, some of the significant changes that we've seen to the electoral process will help. For example, we've just had an independent commission that's put together the redistricting that's taken place in the state of California. While it didn't significantly impact the 23rd Assembly District, it has other districts within the state of California. So people who are more extreme generally are not now coming are not likely to succeed in the general election, where in the past maybe they would, because they would play simply to the extreme of their individual parties. And I think too, one of the things that's important is that when you look at, because we can all say what we want as candidates, and it is frustrating for me, and I guess I get a little embarrassed about talking about myself, but when it comes to the actual people who have supported me, after this primary, I've been able to get Democratic support and certainly have Republican support as well. So I've really tried hard to prove, not just by my word, but by my actions, that I'll be somebody who can reach across the aisle and protect those vital programs that we have within the state of California.
Here in the Valley, we're particularly concerned about the impact of water shortages. It affects our way of life, it affects our giant agricultural industry. Do you have any specific proposals for dealing with the shortage? How would you prioritize such areas as new dams, gray water, recycling, water banks, conservation by controlling population growth or density? Where are we going to go with this water problem? Bob, want to start us off?
Murray, I think maybe the best way is to just kind of stay with the theme that I just mentioned earlier, is that what is it that we've done in the city of Clovis as opposed to what it is that I would do, because I think that it's my actions that speak louder than any words that I say. So we've worked well together in the community of Clovis to make sure that we increase our water capacity, and we've done that through two ways. First, you have to understand that before, we used to just draw a lot of our water from underground reservoirs. There was just wells all over the city of Clovis. But what we realized is that we also had irrigation canals that were coming through the city of Clovis, and our citizens had entitlements to those particular canals. And so we began to use those canals as a source of water for our citizens, and we put together a surface water treatment plant. And that has served us well in the community of Clovis. So we're utilizing and being good stewards of those water resources that come through our community. The second thing is that we have built a waste treatment facility within the city of Clovis, which actually takes water that used to just be treated as sewage and now treats it in such a way that it can be utilized not for drinking purposes, but for irrigation purposes. And so we need to start thinking of creative ways in order to make sure that we are good stewards of our water in this state. And those are a couple of examples.
When I was mayor, 8 years, there were 2 significant wet years. Every 4 years, it seems, we do get an El Nino or La Nina. And I took a helicopter up once and took a look at hundreds of thousands of acre-feet of water spilling over the dam at Millerton Lake. There is a lot of water that we're losing. And so I support catchment dams, and I support the kind of hydrology that has been successful in times past, so that we can store it, we can keep the rain, the wet years, and utilize it where it is needed. I also think we have to see hydrology for the terrific science that it has been and reintroduce it to folks who don't quite understand. When you go to places, like Millerton Lake, and you see the water being saved. You see, you have dams that create electricity on the Kings River. Those are important combinations, and I think that's the way to get back to the future.
This is such a hot issue that I wonder if you want to rebut each other on it in any way. Any other comment on it, Bob?
Well, I think that maybe I don't want to rebut what it is that Jim has said. I think that in many respects, what we have in the state of California is a very unique geology, and we need to take advantage of that, particularly in the Central Valley. One of the reasons why we are such a strong agricultural area is that we've had the opportunity to take advantage of this, the runoff from the Sierra Nevada. We certainly do need to increase that water capacity, and I think that Temperance Flat certainly is an idea that we need to continue to push forward and study further. It is about time to build that dam, as well as some dams that are up north. For example, Sites Reservoir, another opportunity to store water for the state of California and then use it for purposes of agriculture down in the Central Valley.
Any further thoughts?
I think just to comment about the complexity. This is a very complex issue, and there are passions on all sides. And one of the things that I think is important when you want to represent people up in Sacramento is we need to be listening and hearing all of the water issues and all of those who have water interests. And part of the solution, I think, is bringing folks to the table, looking at hydrology that has worked in times past and seeing if we can't do it again. And so I think it's bringing the stakeholders to the table and trying to do the kinds of things that's been successful in the past.
Jim, you talk about passions. Another area where there seems to be a lot of passionate debate is over the high-speed rail. Is it good for California? Is it good for the Valley? Is it a waste of money? Where do you stand? You want to start us off, Jim, on that one? Yes, please.
Yeah, I oppose high-speed rail for a lot of reasons. A well-intentioned idea, starting off with plans that said we were going to do one thing and now we're going to do something entirely different. So the longer you get to know what high-speed rail will do in terms of its cost and the damage it will do to agriculture particularly, I think you have to come to the conclusion that it's been way oversold, that it's very, very expensive, that there's a high probability it will not achieve the kinds of successes that those who support it say it will. And so I think we have to see it for what it is. And I think part of leadership is taking a good hard look and deciding what looks like a success and what looks like a failure. And then you've got to make some tough choices. So I do oppose it.
Bob?
I'm opposed to the high-speed rail, and the reason for that really stems from the frustration that we experience as voters on a regular basis. Candidates or initiatives promise one thing, and then they do something else. In 2008, the voters of the state of California actually approved the issuance of bonds for the high-speed rail. There were certain mandates that were associated with that proposition. It was called Proposition 1A back then. Those mandates had to do with the costs associated with the high-speed rail, how long it would take to get from LA to San Francisco, and when it would be completely built. Well, now we've had the opportunity to see the final business plan for the high-speed rail. It's been adopted by the High-Speed Rail Authority, and it did not meet those three important mandates. So once again, we have a time where we learned that talk is cheap, and what we need to be focusing on is actually what people are going to follow through with, what it is that they have done. And here, when it comes to high-speed rail, the promises are not being kept. The solution then, I think, is to, now that we have the final business plan in place, to put the vote again out there to citizens of the state of California to make the decision whether they approve of this final business plan.
Let's wrap up with some final statements. And Jim, why don't you go first and give us a summary on why Jim?
Well, thank you again for the opportunity to the League of Women Voters. And for those of you who have watched and who care about the state of California, we really do appreciate and thank you for paying attention to this. These are serious times. And so I ask for your vote. And I've said before, I think this feels a lot like a job interview. And so I guess resumes matter. And 8 years as the mayor of the fifth largest city in the state of California. I think prepared me well for large budgets. We worked with 9 bargaining units, 4,000 employees. We balanced the budgets. We left a surplus. We did the kinds of things with large numbers at the end of them that we will be faced with in Sacramento. So I think that experience counts, and I'd ask you to look at that. But also, being in small business for 30 years, I think demonstrates a side of the resume that I think is very helpful, because we take a look at what government can do to us. We also look at what government can do for us, and when you're in the private sector, you can learn the distinction very quickly. I think it's a good combination that I bring, and I would respectfully request your vote. Thank you.
Bob?
Yeah, thank you. Mary, I don't know if we've done a very good job today of identifying the distinctions between Jim and myself. Certainly when it comes to name recognition, I don't have it. Jim has been around for a long time. He's run for Congress twice. He has been mayor of the city of Fresno back in the 90s. And I'm just a fellow from Clovis who's done, I think, some good work there with some colleagues of mine. And I'm a prosecutor by day. I put criminals behind bars, and generally for the rest of their life. And I'm a public servant. I am asking for your vote. I would ask that you continue to investigate who it is that has endorsed both of us, and I think that as you look at it, the people who have had the opportunity to work with both Jim and myself have chosen to endorse me. For example, the 2 mayors who have come after Jim in the city of Fresno have endorsed me, Alan Autry and Ashley Swearingen. Both chambers of commerce, those who engage in business on a regular basis, both the Fresno and Clovis Chamber of Commerce have endorsed me. Republicans and Democrats have endorsed me. I guess if I haven't made the distinction today, I'm sorry about that, but I would ask for you to maybe look at those people who have endorsed me, who've worked with both of us, and I'd ask that you vote for me in the final analysis. Thank you, and I would appreciate your support.
Well, our time is up, and on behalf of the League of Women Voters, I want to thank the candidates for sharing their views, and I want to thank Community Media Access Collaborative for providing their facilities today. Now it will be your turn to be a good citizen and vote on Tuesday, November 6th. If you have any questions about voting procedures, the county clerk's office will be glad to assist you. You can call them at 559-600-8683 or email at clerk-elections@co.fresno.ca.us. So, it's up to you now. Thank you, and remember to vote.